The airline industry is actually in a sort of bit of a flux at the moment. I mean, you've obviously had the impact of all these storms, you've had the impact of the government shutdown, and you've got the uncertainty about the year ahead. And so American Airlines is taking a more bullish view of the year ahead. They're sort of following their peers, United and Delta, in targeting the most premium end of the spectrum. And they're sort of hoping that by aiming their product at the premium end of the market, they can sort of offset the sort of downturn that's happened at the bottom end of the market. JetBlue also talking about how at the moment things look a bit shaky, but they're talking about how they see a road to profitability and a free cash flow by the end of 2027. So slightly more long-term view of when the recovery might happen. And that sort of explains the dichotomy in the earnings forecast for both those companies.
And of course, JetBlue is also doing what it can to premiumize, if that's a verb, its experience for customers too, with
Absolutely.
the opening of that new lounge in JFK. So that is the story with airlines, and it's been fairly consistent too with what we heard from Delta and United. Where does that leave the smaller carriers that need to either team up or fade into oblivion? I'm thinking Spirit, I'm thinking Frontier. Is there still a market for these discount carriers?
So the market at the moment is very tough for the discount carriers. So essentially what's happening is that the top end of the market is going to Delta and United for their premium products like first class and business class. And on the other end of the market, you have sort of everyone else competing to get the lowest cost tickets into the hands of the passengers. And that's sort of eroding margins, especially as costs for both pilots and cabin crew are hurting the ultra low cost carriers and the low cost carriers. And sort of that's sort of been explained by this K-shaped recovery that airline executives are talking about. And so JetBlue and the others are sort of trying to get the premium end of it. I mean, we've seen even Spirit Airlines talking about how they're adding a so-called business class product. They've added Wi-Fi, they've added all sorts of things to keep people coming back to them. And so they're hoping that by slightly differentiating themselves from just very commoditized ultra low cost carriers, they can be able to get in those customers.
Well, then it kind of goes back to the point, is there a need for a real true low-cost carrier out there? If some of these supposed ones are going kind of mid-market, higher market, is there a market demand for that, or is everybody just willing to pay up for travel?
At the moment, it looks the people who are willing to pay up for travel are the people willing to pay up for travel. And so at the bottom end of the market, I mean, everyone talks about how there will be a recovery of the ultra low-cost carriers, and that once people are more certain about the economy and once people at the bottom end of that K start to see some stability in the economy, people will travel. Because, I mean, remember during the pandemic, there was as we exited the pandemic, there was this boom in travel for across the board, and that sort of has further split up. And so we will see that demand coming back. We just don't know when and what sort of shape that will be.
So, Sid, you also cover Boeing, and it came out with its results. And in terms of the numbers for the fourth quarter, free cash flow topping estimates, it generated cash for a second straight quarter. That sounds like it's good news. How far along this recovery, this long-awaited recovery, is Boeing actually?
So Boeing is on the road to recovery. They're still not there yet, but they are recovering. I mean, their fourth quarter results and their full year results were boosted by the sale of their Jeppesen digital aviation subsidiary, and that sort of gave them a $9.6 billion boost. And at the same time, the Boeing is sort of ramping up production. They are ramping up sales. I mean, they've seen a surge in sales. I mean, in the ever since the Trump administration came in, we've seen a surge in Boeing sales. And so Kelly Ortberg, the new CEO, is sort of pushing Boeing to improve production, ramp up production at a steady pace. I mean, they've gone to about 42 737 MAX jets a month, and they are sort of further boosting those production numbers, and that will get them at the sort of where they want to be. And Kelly Ortberg talked about how $10 billion in free cash flow is his target, and the company's on its way there.
Sid, I'm glad you mentioned deliveries, because I guess I learned long ago about this aircraft manufacturing business. It's not the sales you announce, it's the orders that you actually deliver. You mentioned kind of on the 737, which is the key aircraft for Boeing, that around 42 a month here. Where does a company want to get to, and by what time frame?
So Boeing's still way below. It used to be above 50 pre-pandemic, when they sort of shut down production of the MAX because of the grounding that happened after those two fatal crashes. And so they need to get to beyond that. Remember, Airbus has talked about 75 a month by 2027 on their rival A320 model. And so Boeing would have to sort of ramp up production to some of those levels to target that backlog. I mean, they've got a sort of record-breaking $682 billion backlog of customer orders. And so that's actually when airlines so the airframers like Boeing and Airbus only get paid when they actually deliver those planes. So when they book those orders, they don't really get the money from the airlines. The airlines pay them when they get those planes. And so for Boeing to actually start generating that free cash, they need to actually get those planes out the door.
Yeah.
And that they need to do by ramping up production.